I'm Colonel Sharon Crest, 42, and I built my career from a quiet military scholarship kid into someone trusted with some of the darkest corners of national security. For years, I backed my little sister through every crisis, financial, emotional, you name it, thinking loyalty was enough to keep us close. But when she mocked my entire career in front of a crowd, bragging about her CIA husband and calling me the librarian, only for him to recognize me as Skyfall, I realized I had to draw a line I'd avoided for years. Have you ever been dismissed or humiliated by someone you'd spent half your life supporting? If you have, share your story in the comments. Trust me, you're not the only one. Before I tell you exactly what happened, drop where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to stand your ground after someone crossed a line, hit like and subscribe. What unfolded next even I didn't see coming. I drove home the third week of November after 4 months overseas. The sky was that pale gray that comes right before winter locks in, and the highway stretched flat and familiar. I'd landed at Andrews 12 hours earlier, filed my after-action reports, and changed out of my uniform in a bathroom at the Pentagon before heading to my sister's place in Arlington. My name is Colonel Sharon Crest. I'm 42 years old, United States Air Force, and I've been in the service for 20 years. Most people don't know what I do, and that's by design. When someone asks, I usually say something vague about intelligence, coordination, or logistics. It's easier that way. The truth requires clearances most people will never have. My sister Elise is 4 years younger than me. We grew up in the same house, shared the same childhood, but we're different in ways that go beyond birth order. Elise has always been the social one, the one who knew how to work a room, who collected friends like some people collect stamps. She's beautiful in that effortless way that makes people want to be near her. I was the practical one, the one who made lists and kept our mother's bills organized when things got tight. Elise got married 2 years ago to a man named Ryan Turner. I'd met him once at the wedding, briefly. He was polite, reserved, and when someone asked what he did for work, he said something about government contracting. Elise loved to talk about Ryan's job. She'd mention it at every opportunity, dropping hints that he worked for the CIA, that he did important things, dangerous things. It became her favorite conversation piece at parties, at family dinners, with strangers at the grocery store. My husband works for the CIA, she'd say, and then she'd smile like she'd just revealed a delicious secret. I pulled into her driveway at 1800 hours. The house was a tidy colonial with white shutters and a wreath already hanging on the door even though Thanksgiving was still a week away. Elise opened the door before I could knock. Sharon, you're here. She hugged me, smelling like expensive perfume and red wine. Come in, come in. Ryan's on his way. He had to work late, something classified, you know how it is. I stepped inside. The house was warm, decorated in that catalog-perfect way that Elise had always been good at. She led me to the kitchen where she'd set out cheese and crackers on a marble board. So, how was your trip? She asked, pouring me a glass of wine without asking if I wanted one. Long, I said, but productive. Where were you again? Can't really say. She laughed. Right. Everything's always classified with you. Although I can't imagine what's so secret about Air Force admin work. Ryan deals with actual terrorists. He's in the field constantly. Just last month he was in, well, I probably shouldn't say. I took a sip of wine and didn't respond. This was familiar territory. Elise had spent the last 2 years positioning her life as more exciting, more important, more dangerous than mine. I'd learned to let it slide off me like rain off a flight jacket. How's Mom? I asked, changing the subject. She's good. Still in Florida. Still refusing to get a smartphone. Elise rolled her eyes affectionately. You should visit her more often. She misses you. I visit when I can. I know. You're very busy filing reports and organizing things. It's just, family is important too. There it was again. That subtle implication that my work was somehow less significant than real life, that I was choosing paperwork over people. I'd heard variations of this from Elise for years. She'd never asked what I actually did. She'd simply decided for herself that it must be boring, administrative, unimportant. The front door opened. Babe? I'm home. Ryan Turner walked into the kitchen still wearing a suit, no tie. He looked like what he was, a man trained to blend in while staying constantly alert. His eyes swept the room in a way most people wouldn't notice, but I did. I recognized the habit because I had it too. Ryan, you remember my sister Sharon, Elise said. Of course. Good to see you again, Colonel. He shook my hand. His grip was firm, professional. Just Sharon is fine when I'm off duty, I said. Sharon's being modest, Elise jumped in. She probably does do important work. I mean, all military work is important, right? It's just different from what Ryan does. He's operational. Field work. Sharon's more, behind the scenes. Ryan's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted slightly. He was studying me now, not obviously, but I felt it. What brings you to town? He asked. Just finished a rotation. Thought I'd visit before the holidays. A rotation, Elise repeated. That sounds so official. Like you were working at a different office building for a few months. I smiled and didn't correct her. Over dinner, Elise dominated the conversation. She talked about her book club, her yoga classes, a vacation she and Ryan were planning to Turks and Caicos. She refilled her wine glass 3 times. Ryan ate quietly, speaking only when directly addressed, and I noticed he kept looking at my hands. I have a small tattoo on my left hand, between my thumb and forefinger. It's not visible most of the time, usually covered by sleeves or gloves or simply positioned away from view. Most people never see it. Those who do don't know what it means unless they've operated at a certain level in certain communities. I caught Ryan looking at it twice during dinner. The second time, his eyes lingered just a moment too long before he looked away. So Sharon, Elise said, leaning back in her chair with her wine glass, are you still doing the same thing? Or did they move you to a different department? More or less the same, I said. God, I go crazy doing the same thing for 20 years. Don't you ever want something more exciting? Ryan's water glass paused halfway to his mouth. I find my work engaging, I said. I'm sure you do. Everyone thinks their job is important. It's just funny how we ended up so different. You with your organized, structured military career, and me married to someone who actually, catches bad guys. She said it lightly, laughing, like it was a joke between sisters. But I heard what was underneath. I'd always heard it. Elise needed to position herself above me, needed to feel like she'd won some invisible competition we'd never actually been having. Ryan set his glass down carefully. Elise, what? I'm just saying Sharon's work is different. There's nothing wrong with that. Not everyone can handle what you do, babe. Sharon's probably great at what she does. Organization, logistics, whatever. It's important too. I watched Ryan's jaw tighten. His eyes went to my hand again, and this time they stayed there for 3 full seconds. When he looked up and met my eyes, I saw something I hadn't expected. He knew. He didn't know everything. He couldn't. But he knew enough to know that Elise had no idea who she was talking to. The rest of dinner passed in strained politeness. Elise drank more wine. Ryan grew quieter. And I calculated the distance to the door while maintaining perfect composure, the way I'd been trained to do in rooms far more dangerous than my sister's dining room. The backyard party was Elise's idea. Just a casual thing, she'd said when she called me that morning. Some neighbors, a few of Ryan's work friends. Nothing fancy. You should come. I almost said no. I had reports to review, emails to answer, 3 different briefings to prepare for meetings the following week. But something in her voice, that particular brightness that meant she was planning something, made me agree. I arrived at 1500 hours. The November sun was weak, but the day was unseasonably warm. People clustered on the deck and the lawn, holding beers and glasses of white wine. I recognized no one. Sharon, you made it. Elise appeared with 2 glasses of champagne, already tipsy. Here, have one. You're so tense all the time. You need to relax more. I took the glass to be polite. Elise immediately steered me toward a group of her neighbors. Everyone, this is my sister Sharon. She's in the Air Force. She works with reports and databases and things. Very organized. Basically works in a library, but a military library. A few people smiled politely. Someone asked if I'd been deployed. I said yes. They asked where. I said I couldn't really discuss it. The conversation moved on. Elise kept drinking. She got louder as the afternoon wore on, her laugh carrying across the yard. I stayed near the edge of the party, nursing my champagne, watching her hold court. This was her element. She was good at this, always had been. Ryan arrived late, still in work clothes. He looked tired. When he saw me, he nodded once, then moved to the cooler for a beer. He didn't join the party so much as observe it from the margins, like me. At some point, Elise gathered a group of people near the deck railing. I was standing a few feet away, looking at my phone, when I heard her voice rise above the others. I'm just saying, there are different levels of service, right? Like, Ryan's job is actual operational work. He's dealing with terrorists, with real threats. My sister files reports. She works in basically a library. It's totally different. I looked up. 6 people were listening to her, including 2 men in suits who I assumed were Ryan's colleagues. I mean, I'm proud of Sharon, Elise continued. Military service is important. But let's be honest, not all military jobs are created equal. Some people are in the field catching bad guys, and some people are organizing files in an office building. One of the men in suits looked uncomfortable. The other was staring at his beer. Ryan had gone completely still. I stepped forward, not to confront her, just to move away from the conversation. But Elise saw me and lit up. Sharon. Perfect timing. We were just talking about how crazy Ryan's job is. Tell them what you do. It's so different from his work. Elise, Ryan said quietly. What? I'm just explaining. She grabbed Ryan's arm, pulling him closer, her smile wide and bright. My husband catches terrorists. Sharon works in a library. The words hung in the air. I saw the exact moment she expected me to laugh along, to play the role of the boring sister, to validate her need to be more important. Instead, I reached for the champagne glass on the railing beside me. My left hand extended, my sleeve pulled back slightly, and the small tattoo became visible in the afternoon light. Ryan saw it. His entire body locked up. The beer bottle in his hand trembled. Elise, he said, and his voice was different now. Harder. Stop talking. She blinked at him, confused, still smiling. Relax, babe. It's just Sharon. She doesn't mind. Right, Sharon? Ryan's hand shot out and grabbed Elise's arm. Not violently, but firmly. I said stop. The group had gone quiet. Everyone was watching now. Ryan, what's wrong with you? Elise tried to laugh it off, looking around for support. I'm just explaining the difference between no. Ryan's face had drained of color. He was staring at my hand, at the tattoo, and I saw his training kick in. His posture shifted. His breathing changed. That is Skyfall. The 2 men in suits went rigid. Elise looked between us, her smile faltering. What? Who? Ryan took a step closer to me, and his hand moved automatically to his side, almost like he was going to salute before he caught himself. Ma'am. Colonel. I didn't realize. I didn't know. It's fine, I said quietly. Someone want to explain what's happening? Elise's voice had an edge now, the first hint of real uncertainty breaking through. Ryan turned to her slowly. Your sister isn't a librarian, Elise. She doesn't file reports. Then what does she do? She runs the black sites. The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear ice shifting in someone's drink. A bird calling from the neighbor's yard. The distant sound of traffic on the main road. Elise stared at me. What? Sharon, what is he talking about? You work in intelligence, right? You said intelligence. It's classified, I said. We should let this go. Let it go. You let me think you worked in an office. You let me, she stopped. Her face was red now, whether from wine or embarrassment, I couldn't tell. You're making this up. Both of you. This is some kind of joke. Ryan shook his head once, sharp. No, ma'am. Skyfall is real. She's real. She's the reason half the operations in my directorate even exist. One of the men in suits had taken several steps back. The other had pulled out his phone, probably already sending a message about the security breach happening in a suburban backyard. Elise looked at me like she'd never seen me before. You're a colonel? Yes. And Skyfall is a operational designation. And that's all I can say about it. But you let me think you didn't ask, I said simply. You assumed. She opened her mouth, closed it. Something was working behind her eyes, some calculation she couldn't quite finish. I don't understand. You don't need to understand, Ryan said. You just need to stop talking about it. Right now. Permanently. Elise turned on him. Don't tell me what to do. This isn't about you, he said. This is about operational security and classification levels you don't have access to. She stared at both of us, breathing hard. The party had fractured into uncomfortable clusters, people pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. I set down my champagne glass. I should go. No, Elise said. No, you should stay and explain why you've been lying to me for 20 years. I never lied. I just didn't correct your assumptions. That's the same thing. Actually, I said, and my voice carried the authority I used in briefing rooms with generals and agency directors. It's not. She flinched. She'd never heard me speak like that before. To her, I'd always been her older sister, responsible and steady, but ultimately less interesting than her own life. Now she was seeing something else, something that didn't fit into the story she'd told herself. The betrayal wasn't what she'd said about me. I'd endured worse from enemy combatants and hostile interrogations. The betrayal was that she'd chosen to diminish me without ever wondering if there might be more to know. She'd needed me to be smaller so she could feel bigger. And for 20 years, I'd let her. I walked past her toward the gate. Ryan followed me. Colonel, I apologize for the security breach. I'll file a report, don't I said. Nothing operational was disclosed. Just a code name. We'll call it a draw. He nodded, but he still looked shaken. For what it's worth, ma'am, I've read the briefings. I know what you've done. It's an honor to meet you properly. Take care of her, I said. She's going to need time to process this. Yes, ma'am. I left them standing in the backyard while the party died around them. In my car, I sat for a moment before starting the engine. My phone showed 3 new classified messages, a meeting request from a general at CENTCOM, and a text from my aide asking about tomorrow's briefing schedule. I started the car and pulled away from the house where my sister was just beginning to understand that the world was bigger and more complicated than she'd ever allowed herself to imagine. Elise and I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone and leaving feels like both an escape and a betrayal. Our father worked construction when he worked at all. Our mother was a receptionist at a dental office, stretching every paycheck to cover rent and groceries and the school fees that seemed to come due every month. I was always the responsible one. Not by choice exactly, but by necessity. When Dad didn't come home, I was the one who made sure Elise had dinner. When Mom worked double shifts, I was the one who checked homework and signed permission slips. I was 12 when I started keeping a household budget written in pencil in a spiral notebook, calculating what we could afford and what we couldn't. Elise was different. She was popular, confident, the girl everyone wanted to be friends with. She struggled with math and science, but excelled at reading people, at knowing exactly what to say to make someone like her. I was proud of her in a protective, almost parental way. I wanted her to have the freedom I'd never quite had, to not worry about things like utility bills and whether we'd make rent. When I was 17, a recruiter came to our high school. I listened to him talk about the Air Force Academy, about opportunities and education, and a career that could take you anywhere in the world. I applied that night. Elise was 13 and didn't understand why I'd want to join the military. You're smart enough for regular college, she'd said, like the military was somehow less than. I got in. Full ride. I left for Colorado Springs the summer after graduation. Mom cried at the airport. Elise was already thinking about her freshman year of high school, about tryouts for the dance team, about normal teenage concerns that I'd never quite had time for. The academy was brutal and transformative. I learned discipline, strategy, and how to function on 3 hours of sleep. I learned that I was good at intelligence work, that I had a mind for patterns and connections others missed. I commissioned as a second lieutenant in intelligence, and that's where the trajectory really began. My early career was conventional, intelligence analysis, briefing reports, standard stuff. But I was good at it. I got noticed. By my 4th year, I was working joint operations with other agencies. By year 6, I had a top-secret clearance and was being read into programs most officers never heard about. Special activities came calling when I was a captain. They didn't explain much in the recruitment process, just asked if I'd be willing to work outside traditional command structures on operations that would never appear in my official record. I said yes. That's when I became Skyfall. The designation itself is classified, but what I can say is this. I coordinate joint operations between the Department of Defense and other government agencies at sites that don't officially exist. I oversee interrogations, intelligence collection, and tactical planning for operations that can't be acknowledged publicly. I've been in places I can't name, working with people whose real identities I don't know, making decisions that have consequences measured in lives saved or lost. I made major at 32, ahead of schedule. Lieutenant colonel at 36. Full colonel at 40, which is rare for someone in my field. Each promotion came with more responsibility, more clearances, more operations that I can't discuss outside secure facilities. Meanwhile, back home, Elise was living a completely different life. She'd gone to community college for 2 years, then dropped out to work retail. She moved from boyfriend to boyfriend, always looking for someone who could provide the stability she'd never had growing up. She was 28 when she met Ryan at a friend's wedding. He was established, mature, working for the government. She saw security and status, 2 things she'd always wanted. I came home for the wedding. By then I was a lieutenant colonel running operations across 3 continents, but Elise introduced me as my sister who's in the Air Force. People would ask what I did and she'd jump in before I could answer. Intelligent stuff. It's boring. She won't even talk about it. She never asked. Not once in 20 years did she sit me down and say, "Sharon, what exactly do you do?" She filled in the blanks herself, and the picture she painted was small and safe and unthreatening to her own self-image. I let her. I told myself it was operational security that I couldn't explain even if she asked. But the truth is more complicated. Part of me liked being underestimated. Part of me was too tired from actual operational stress to deal with family drama. And part of me, the part one don't like to examine too closely, had learned to keep distance between my 2 lives because mixing them felt dangerous in ways I couldn't articulate. I sent money when they needed it. I paid for Mom's roof repair and Elise's car transmission and never mentioned it. I showed up for birthdays and holidays when I wasn't deployed. I played the role of the steady, reliable older sister who had a stable government job and a boring life. Elise got married. She posted pictures on social media of her perfect house and her perfect life. And she started talking about Ryan's job, constantly, to anyone who would listen. "My husband works for the CIA" became her favorite sentence. It made her feel important, connected to something bigger than herself. She'd finally found what she'd been looking for: status, security, a story that made her interesting at parties. And the cost of that story was making me smaller in comparison. "Sharon just does paperwork," she'd say. "Ryan's in the field." I watched it happen over months and years. Watched her build an identity around being married to someone important while simultaneously diminishing the person who'd protected her, supported her, and been there for her since childhood. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It was slow and cumulative, death by 1,000 small cuts. Each dismissive comment, each joke about my boring job, each time she used me as a contrast to make her life seem more exciting. I'd survived interrogations by trained hostiles. I'd operated in combat zones and made life and death calls in real time. But sitting at family dinners while my sister made jokes about me filing papers, that hit different. That was personal in a way enemy action never was. Because she didn't know she was wrong. She believed her own story completely. And I'd let her believe it, right up until the moment Ryan saw the tattoo and everything shattered. The party was over by the time I got home to my temporary housing near base. I'd taken a short-term lease on a furnished apartment for the month I'd be stateside before my next deployment. It was anonymous and clean, like a hotel room, which suited me fine. I changed out of civilian clothes into running gear and went for a 10-mile run, processing the afternoon while my body handled the familiar rhythm of movement. When I got back, showered, and sat down with a cup of coffee, my phone showed 7 missed calls from Elise and 3 from Ryan. I didn't call back. Instead, I opened my laptop and went through the intelligence briefings that had accumulated while I was out. There was a situation developing in North Africa that would likely require my attention within the next 72 hours. A joint operation in Southeast Asia was waiting for final approval. 3 different requests for tactical consultation on ongoing investigations. This was my real life. The other part, the family dinners and backyard parties, that was the theater. I'd spent so long keeping them separate that I'd forgotten there could be consequences to maintaining that wall. At 2200 hours, my phone rang. "Ryan." I answered. "Colonel Crust." "Ma'am, I'm sorry to bother you." "Elise she's having a hard time processing what happened." She's asking questions I can't answer. That's appropriate. You can't answer them. She thinks you've been lying to her for 20 years. I haven't lied about anything. I know that, ma'am. But from her perspective. I waited. I could hear music in the background, voices. He'd stepped outside to make this call. She's always talked about your job like it was nothing, Ryan said. Like you pushed papers in some office building. I never corrected her because I didn't know you were Skyfall. I thought you were just another intelligence officer. But now she feels like everyone's been lying to her. I never told her I worked in a library, I said. She decided that herself. Yes, ma'am, I understand. But she's my wife, and she's upset, and I'm trying to figure out how to help her without violating classification. Tell her this, I said. Tell her I have a job that requires secrecy and that this secrecy exists for good reasons. Tell her that I've never lied to her, but I also couldn't correct every assumption she made. Tell her that my work is classified and will remain classified, but that doesn't mean our relationship has to change unless she needs it to. I'll try, ma'am. And Ryan? The tattoo. How many people at your agency know what it means? A pause. Not many, ma'am. Maybe 50 people in the entire directorate. It's not something we talk about outside secure facilities. Good. Let's keep it that way. Yes, ma'am. For what it's worth, Elise isn't a security risk. She won't talk about it. I know. She's my sister. I know who she is. After we hung up, I sat with my coffee and looked out the window at the parking lot below. I thought about all the ways I'd let Elise build her false narrative. How I'd stayed silent when she talked about my boring job. How I'd never corrected her, never pushed back, never claimed the authority I'd earned. I'd told myself it was operational security. But there was more to it than that. There was also pride, or maybe the opposite of pride. Some part of me that didn't want to be the person who threw her rank around at family dinners. That wanted to keep that part of my life separate and clean. But separation is a luxury, and sometimes it creates its own problems. By letting Elise believe I was less than I was, I'd enabled her to treat me with less respect than I deserved. Not just as a colonel, but as a person. As her sister. The text came through at 23:15. From Elise, "You embarrass me in front of everyone." I stared at it for a full minute. Not angry, just noting the pattern. She'd been publicly corrected about something she'd been wrong about for years, and her first response was to blame me for her embarrassment rather than examine why she'd been wrong. I didn't reply. Instead, I pulled up my operational calendar and reviewed the upcoming week. 3 classified briefings, 2 meetings with Joint Task Force commanders, 1 secured video call with an agency director whose name I couldn't write down. This was my life. The operational tempo, the classified meetings, the decisions that carried real weight. I'd worked for 2 decades to get here. I'd deployed to combat zones, learned 4 languages, earned advanced degrees in intelligence and strategic studies. I'd briefed generals and cabinet members. I'd run operations that had saved lives. And I'd let my sister think I filed paperwork in an office building because it was easier than explaining what I really did. The pattern was clear now, laid out like an intelligence assessment. Elise needed me to be smaller so she could feel adequate. I'd accommodated that need because family harmony seemed more important than my own recognition. Ryan had inadvertently shattered that dynamic by recognizing something Elise had chosen never to see. And now Elise was angry. Not at herself for being wrong, but at me for the revelation. I finished my coffee and closed the laptop. Tomorrow I'd be back on base, back in the world where my rank and role were clear and unambiguous. Where people didn't question my authority or diminish my contributions. Where I could make command decisions and know they'd be followed. But tonight I sat in a temporary apartment, looking at a text message from my sister, and I understood something I should have seen earlier. You can't maintain a relationship with someone who needs you to be less than you are. Eventually, the truth breaks through, and when it does, they'll blame you for their own misconceptions. I set the phone down without responding and went to bed. I had a briefing at 0600 hours. The operational world didn't stop because my personal life had become complicated. I met Elise 3 days later at a coffee shop near her house. Neutral territory. Public enough to keep things civil, but quiet enough to actually talk. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with a latte she hadn't touched. She looked tired, her makeup not quite covering the shadows under her eyes. I got coffee and sat down across from her. For a moment, Neither of us spoke. I'm still angry, she finally said. I know. You let me make a fool of myself. You made assumptions, I said. I didn't confirm or deny them. That's basically the same as lying. No, it's not. One is actively deceptive. The other is passive boundary maintenance. She flinched at the clinical tone. You sound like you're briefing someone. Force of habit. See, that's the thing, Sharon. I don't even know who you are anymore. Skyfall? Black sites? Ryan won't tell me anything, but I can Google. I know what black sites are. Are you telling me you've been torturing people? I'm telling you nothing about my operational work because it's classified and you don't have clearance. That hasn't changed. But you're a colonel. Ryan stood at attention when he realized who you were. He looked scared. Respectful, not scared. There's a difference. He said you run operations across multiple continents. That half the things his agency does originate from your, what did he call them? Task orders. I can't confirm or deny any operational details. She stared at me, and I watched her try to reconcile 2 decades of assumptions with the person sitting across from her. Why didn't you tell me? You didn't ask. That's not fair. It's accurate, I said. In 20 years, Elise, you never once asked me for details about my work. You filled in the blanks yourself with whatever made sense to you, and what made sense to you was that I had a boring office job while you married someone exciting. Her face flushed. That's not. I didn't. You did. Constantly. Every family dinner, every holiday, every time we talked. You minimized what I do so you could feel better about your own choices. I was proud of Ryan. That's not the same as putting you down. You used me as a contrast to make him look better. To make yourself look better by association. Sharon files papers, Ryan catches terrorists. You said that exact sentence at least a dozen times. Because that's what I thought was true. Because you never bothered to find out what was actually true, I said, and my voice carried the weight of 20 years of minimized service. You never asked. You just decided who I was and what I did, and you've been treating me accordingly ever since. She opened her mouth, closed it. Tears formed but didn't fall. I didn't know. That's the problem. You didn't want to know. Knowing would have complicated your narrative. What narrative? The one where you're married to someone important, and I'm your boring older sister with a stable government job. You needed me to be less than you so you could feel adequate. That's not fair, she said again, but her voice cracked. Fair or not, it's what happened. And I let it happen because maintaining family peace seemed more important than claiming the recognition I'd earned. We sat in silence. Around us, the coffee shop hummed with normal life. People ordering lattes, typing on laptops, having conversations that didn't involve classified operations or family betrayals. I need you to understand something, I said finally. I don't need you to know the details of my work. I don't need you to understand what Skyfall means or what I do operationally. But I do need you to respect me. As a person, as your sister, as someone who's earned their position through 2 decades of service. I do respect you. No, you respect what you thought I was. The organized, responsible older sister who'd always be there but never overshadow you. You have to decide if you can respect who I actually am. Which is what? A colonel who runs secret operations and can't tell me anything about her real life. Which is someone who serves their country at a level that requires secrecy. Someone who's made sacrifices you can't understand because I can't explain them. Someone who's been patient with your dismissiveness for 20 years because I loved you more than I needed recognition. She wiped her eyes with a napkin. Ryan said you could have ended my career at that party. That if you'd wanted to, you could have made things very difficult for him professionally. That's true. Why didn't you? Because you're my sister. And because embarrassing you wasn't the point. The point was stopping you from continuing to diminish me in front of other people. I didn't mean to. Intent doesn't erase impact, I said. You meant to make yourself look good by comparison. The fact that you didn't realize how wrong you were about me doesn't make it hurt less. She looked down at her untouched latte. What do you want from me? I want you to think before you speak about me. I want you to stop using me as a prop to make your life seem more interesting. I want you to treat me with the same respect you demand for Ryan's career, even though you don't understand the details of mine. That's it. That's not nothing, Elise. That's basic human decency. And if I can't do that, I met her eyes. Then we'll have a relationship that's more distant than either of us probably wants. But I'm not going to keep accepting being diminished just to keep the peace. She processed that. I watched her cycle through emotions, anger, Shame, defensiveness, something that might have been understanding. I don't know how to talk about you now, she said finally. If someone asks what my sister does, what do I say? You say I'm an Air Force colonel and leave it at that. You don't speculate about my job. You don't compare it to Ryan's. You just acknowledge that I serve and move on. That's so vague. That's appropriate. Vague is correct when the details are classified. She sat with that for a moment. Ryan's been different since the party. More careful around me. Like he's worried I'm a security risk or something. Are you? No. I'm not going to tell people about black sites or whatever. I'm not stupid. Then prove it by not talking about it. Not to friends, not to family, not to anyone. What happened at that party stays at that party. People are going to ask. They saw Ryan's reaction. Tell them it was a misunderstanding and change the subject. You're good at controlling conversations, Elise. Use that skill. She almost smiled. Almost. You've changed. You're harder than you used to be. I'm exactly who I've always been. You're just seeing it clearly for the first time. We sat for another few minutes. Eventually, she reached across the table, not quite touching my hand. I'm sorry I diminished your service. I didn't understand what I was doing. I know. Can we fix this? We can try. But it requires you actually changing how you talk about me, not just apologizing and continuing the same patterns. I can do that. We'll see, I said, not unkindly. Actions matter more than promises. I left the coffee shop knowing we'd reached a turning point, but not knowing which way it would tip. Elise had a lifetime of habits to break. I had a lifetime of enabling those habits to unlearn. Whether we could build something healthier remained an open question. But I'd drawn a boundary. For the first time in our relationship, I'd claimed the space I actually occupied instead of shrinking to fit her needs. Whatever came next would be built on truth instead of convenient fiction. 3 weeks passed. I returned to operational tempo, which meant 14-hour days, classified briefings, and the kind of focus that left room for nothing else. The situation in North Africa had evolved into a joint task force operation that required my direct oversight. I spent 4 days in a secure facility coordinating intelligence assets across 3 agencies, sleeping in 2-hour increments, making decisions that would ripple through ongoing operations for months. I didn't have time to think about family dynamics or coffee shop conversations. The work consumed me completely, which was familiar and comfortable. This was the world where I knew the rules, where my authority was clear, where results were measurable. On base, everyone knew exactly who I was. When I walked into the operations center, conversations stopped. When I asked for information, people moved quickly to provide it. Captain Lila Moreno, my aide, handled logistics and scheduling with the kind of precision that came from understanding the weight of every minute in my calendar. Colonel, you have a secure call with General Keane at 1500 hours, she said one morning, reviewing the day's schedule. Then the Joint Task Force briefing at 1630. The CENTCOM report needs your signature by end of business. Prioritize the CENTCOM report. Push the joint briefing to tomorrow if needed. Yes, ma'am. This was the life I'd built. Clear hierarchies, defined objectives, measurable outcomes. No ambiguity, no hurt feelings, no navigating the complicated emotional terrain of family relationships. My phone showed 3 texts from Elise during those weeks. Short messages, testing the boundaries I'd set. Hope you're doing well. Thanksgiving at Mom's this year. Will you come? Ryan says hi. He's still embarrassed about the party. I replied briefly to each one. Professional, but not warm. Present, but not engaging deeply. I was calibrating, watching to see if her behavior had actually changed or if the apology had been performative. Then, on a Thursday afternoon between briefings, my phone rang. Mom. Sharon? Honey? Do you have a minute? A few, I said, stepping out of the operations center into the hallway. Elise called me. She's upset. She said you two had a fight? I leaned against the wall. We had a conversation about boundaries. She said you're angry at her for not understanding your job. That's a simplification, but essentially accurate. Sharon, you know Elise. She doesn't always think before she speaks. She didn't mean any harm. And there it was. The familiar pattern of smoothing things over, minimizing the impact, asking me to be the bigger person because Elise was more fragile. Mom, I love you, but I'm not doing this anymore. Doing what? Accepting behavior that's hurtful just because Elise doesn't mean it to be. Intent and impact are different things. She's spent years diminishing my service, and I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen just to keep family peace. Silence on the line. You sound so hard, honey. I sound clear. There's a difference. She's your sister. I know. And I want a relationship with her. But it has to be built on respect, not on me making myself smaller so she feels adequate. She's always looked up to you. No, Mom. She's always competed with me. And when she felt like she was losing, she changed the rules to make herself the winner. I'm done playing that game. Another silence. I don't understand what happened. You two used to be so close. We used to have a relationship where I accommodated her insecurities. I'm not willing to do that anymore. If she can respect who I actually am, we'll be fine. If she can't, we'll have a more distant relationship. But I'm not negotiating on this. You're really not going to come to Thanksgiving? I didn't say that. I said I'm not negotiating on the boundary. If Elise can be respectful, I'll be there. If she's going to spend the holiday making comments about my boring job or using Ryan's career to diminish mine, I'll pass. I'll talk to her. Don't. This is between me and Elise. She needs to decide what kind of relationship she wants, and I need to see if her actions match her words. After we hung up, I stood in the hallway for a moment. Captain Moreno appeared at the end of the corridor, holding a tablet. Ma'am? The secure call is ready. I pushed off the wall and followed her back into the operations center, leaving the personal complications behind as I stepped back into the world where I knew exactly who I was and what was expected of me. But something had shifted. For years, I'd kept these two worlds completely separate. The professional world where I was Colonel Crust, Skyfall, a senior officer running classified operations. And the personal world where I was just Sharon, the responsible older sister with the boring government job. The separation had felt necessary. But now I understood it had also been protective. Not just operational security, but emotional security. I'd hidden behind classification to avoid claiming my full identity with the people who were supposed to know me best. By setting the boundary with Elise, I'd cracked that separation. I'd brought my professional authority into the personal sphere. Not to intimidate or dominate, but to simply stop diminishing myself for the comfort of others. That night, alone in my temporary quarters, I reviewed after-action reports and felt something settle into place. My command authority and my personal integrity were no longer at odds. I could be the same person in both worlds, direct, clear, unwilling to accept less respect than I'd earned. Whether Elise could meet me there remained to be seen. But for the first time in 20 years, I wasn't bending to find out. Thanksgiving arrived cold and gray, the kind of November day that promised snow but hadn't quite delivered. I drove to Mom's house in Pennsylvania, arriving mid-morning to help with prep work like I had for 20 years. Elise was already there, working on a pumpkin pie. She looked up when I walked in, and for a moment, we just assessed each other. Hey, she said. Hey. Mom swept in with forced cheerfulness, hugging me too tightly. Sharon, I'm so glad you came. Here, help me with the turkey. The day unfolded in careful politeness. Elise and I orbited each other in the kitchen, passing dishes and utensils with the choreography of people who'd spent decades in the same space. But the easy familiarity was gone, replaced by something more cautious. Ryan arrived around noon. When he saw me, he straightened slightly. Colonel. Off-duty, Ryan. Sharon is fine. Yes, ma'am. We sat down to eat at 1400 hours. Mom said grace. We passed dishes around the table. Normal Thanksgiving sounds filled the house, silverware on plates, quiet requests to pass the salt, comments about how good everything tasted. Then Elise's friend Sarah called. Elise excused herself to take it in the other room, and her voice carried back to us. No, we're just having a quiet family day. My sister's here. Yeah, the one in the Air Force. Oh, she's a colonel. She does important work, but it's all classified, so I don't really know the details. I looked at Ryan. He was watching me, trying to gauge my reaction. She's trying, he said quietly. I hear that. When Elise came back, she caught my eye and gave a small shrug like, see, I'm doing what you asked. After dinner, while Mom was boxing up leftovers, Elise and I ended up on the back porch. The sun was setting early, painting the sky in cold purples and grays. I've been thinking about what you said, Elise started. About me needing you to be smaller. I waited. You were right. I did that. I didn't even realize I was doing it, but I was. She wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. Ryan explained some things to me. Not operational things, just context. He said Skyfall is a legend in certain circles. That people talk about you the way they talk about historical figures. That's overstating it. He said you've run operations that saved thousands of lives. He said the tattoo on your hand is something only a handful of people in the entire intelligence community have earned. I can't confirm any of that. I know. But it made me realize how much I didn't know. How much I didn't want to know because it was easier to make you boring than to admit I was jealous. That caught me off guard. Jealous. You always knew what you wanted. You always had a path. I spent my 20s bouncing between jobs and boyfriends, trying to figure out who I was. And then you'd come home in your uniform looking so put together and certain, and I'd feel like I was failing at life. You never said anything, because it felt stupid. You were serving the country, and I was resentful that you seemed to have it all figured out. She wiped her eyes. So I made you smaller in my head. I told myself your job was boring, so I wouldn't have to feel inadequate next to you. I'd spent 20 years thinking Elise was just thoughtless, careless with her words. I hadn't considered that the dismissiveness came from her own insecurity. I still can't tell you about my work, I said. I know. And I don't need you to. I just need to stop pretending it doesn't matter so I can feel better about myself. She turned to face me. I'm sorry, Sharon. For real this time. Not just because you called me out, but because I understand now what I was doing and why it was wrong. The operational part of my brain noted the words, flagged them for verification against future behavior. The sister part of my brain just felt tired and relieved in equal measure. Thank you for saying that. Are we okay? We're getting there, I said. It's not fixed in one conversation, but this is progress. She nodded, accepting that. We stood in the cold for another minute, then went back inside where Mom had coffee brewing and pie waiting. The rest of the holiday passed without incident. Elise didn't talk about my job. She didn't compare me to Ryan. She just treated me like a person whose work she didn't fully understand, but respected anyway. Ryan and I had one brief conversation in the kitchen while cleaning up. He loaded the dishwasher while I wrapped leftovers. Thank you for not filing a security breach report, he said. Nothing reportable happened. You recognized an operational designation. That's not disclosure. Some colonels would have made it a problem anyway. I'm not interested in punishing people for honest mistakes, I said. I'm interested in maintaining appropriate security while also maintaining human relationships. Sometimes those things are compatible. Still, I appreciate it. And for what it's worth, Elise has been different since your conversation. More thoughtful. More aware of how her words land. Good. That's all I wanted. She looked you up, he said. Not your classified work, but your public record. Citations, awards, deployments. She called me crying when she found out you'd received the Legion of Merit twice. That's public information. She didn't know. She never looked. And now she's trying to reconcile who she thought you were with who you actually are. That's her work to do, not mine. Yes, ma'am. I just thought you'd want to know she's trying. I left Pennsylvania feeling something shift between my ribs. Not forgiveness exactly. That implied Elise had somehow wronged me in a clear-cut way. It was more like the relaxation of a long-held tension. The first breath after holding your chest tight for too long. The drive back to base took 4 hours. I spent them thinking about the complexity of family relationships, about how people can love each other and still hurt each other through sheer lack of awareness. About how you can serve your country for 20 years and still struggle to command respect in your own family. By the time I pulled into the base gate and showed my ID, I'd made a decision. I would continue to maintain the boundary. I would continue to expect respect. But I would also allow Elise the space to grow into that respect without holding every past slight against her. Not because she'd earned it, but because I decided that was the person I wanted to be. Someone who could set firm boundaries while still allowing for human growth and change. The guard waved me through. I parked and walked to my quarters, already mentally shifting back into operational mode. Tomorrow, I had 3 classified briefings and a secure call with an agency director. The world kept turning, operations kept running, and my role in that machinery was clear and unambiguous. But tonight, I had a sister who was trying to see me clearly for the first time. And that felt like a different kind of victory than the ones I won in briefing rooms and operations centers. I returned to full operational status the Monday after Thanksgiving. The tempo had increased during the holiday. It always did, as if global threats didn't respect American holiday schedules. I spent the first week back conducting oversight on 3 concurrent operations, briefing senior leaders, and coordinating intelligence sharing protocols with allied agencies. The work consumed me in the way it always had. 16-hour days, classified meetings stacked back-to-back, decisions that carried weight measured in operational success or failure. This was the world I understood completely: clear hierarchies, defined missions, measurable outcomes. My interactions with Elise during this period were minimal but telling. She texted occasionally, brief messages that respected my time. Hope work isn't too crazy. Saw an article about Air Force promotions. Made me think of you. Mom wants to plan Christmas. Let me know your schedule when you can. Each message was carefully neutral, avoiding the old patterns of comparison or diminishment. I noticed the effort and replied in kind, brief, professional, acknowledging. Then, in mid-December, something shifted. I'd just finished a particularly brutal briefing with a 3-star general about an operation that had gone sideways. Not catastrophically, but enough to require after-action analysis and strategic adjustment. I was in my office, reviewing the files, when Captain Moreno knocked. "Ma'am, you have a civilian visitor at the gate. Your sister." I looked up. "Elise is here?" "Yes, ma'am." She called ahead. "She's asking if you have 30 minutes. This wasn't like Elise. She'd never come to base before, had never expressed interest in seeing where I actually worked. "Clear her through. Have her escorted to the admin building, conference room B." "Yes, ma'am." 20 minutes later, I walked into the conference room. Elise was standing at the window, looking out at the flight line where F-16s were conducting training operations. She turned when I entered, and I saw she'd dressed carefully, business casual, respectful without trying too hard. "Hi," she said. "Sorry to just show up. I probably should have asked first." "It's fine. What's going on?" She gestured at the window. "This is where you work?" "One of the places. I rotate between several facilities depending on operational needs. It's bigger than I thought. More official. It's an Air Force base. They tend to be official." She smiled at that, a real smile. "Right. Sorry, I'm nervous. I've never been on a military installation before." I waited, letting her get to whatever had brought her here. "I wanted to tell you something in person," she said finally. "Ryan and I are going to couples counseling." That wasn't what I'd expected. "Okay. Not because things are bad between us. Because I realized I've been doing to him what I was doing to you. Using his job as a prop to make myself feel important. Treating his career as an extension of my identity instead of respecting it as his own thing." That's insightful. Our therapist helped me see the pattern. How I minimize myself and then try to compensate by attaching to other people's accomplishments. I've been doing it my whole life, and it's not fair to anyone. She sat down at the conference table, and I joined her. "I wanted you to know that I'm not just apologizing and moving on," she continued. "I'm actually working on why I do this. Why I needed you to be smaller. Why I couldn't let you be impressive without feeling threatened." That's good, Elise. That's real progress. I also wanted to see where you work. Not the classified parts, obviously, but just this. The base. The real context of your life. She looked around the conference room with its government-issue furniture and security clearance notices on the walls. "You spend most of your time in places like this? Or more secure versions, yes. And you make decisions that affect, what? Operations across multiple countries." That's accurate, but vague enough not to be problematic. She took a breath. "I can't imagine the pressure." "You learn to carry it. It becomes normal." "Does it? Or do you just get better at pretending it's normal?" That hit closer than I expected. "Both, probably." We sat quietly for a moment. Through the window, another F-16 took off, the sound muted by the thick glass. "Mom told me you might not come for Christmas," Elise said. I told her I'd come if the dynamic was going to be respectful. Same boundary as Thanksgiving. It will be. I promise. No comparisons, no dismissive comments, no using Ryan's job to make yours seem boring. Then I'll be there. Good. She stood. I should let you get back to work. I know you're busy. I walked her to the door. On impulse, I said, "Elise, thank you for coming here. It means something that you wanted to see this part of my life." "I should have wanted to see it years ago," she said. But better late than never, right? After she left, I stood in the conference room for a moment, processing. The operational part of my brain noted the progress, flagged it as a positive indicator. The personal part, the part one usually kept locked down tight, felt something that might have been hope. Captain Moreno appeared in the doorway. "Ma'am? The CENTCOM call is ready." I followed her back into the operational world, but something had shifted. The complete separation between my two lives, the wall I'd maintained for 20 years, had developed a crack. Not a break, just a crack. Enough light getting through to see both sides clearly. That night, I sat in my quarters and wrote an email to General Keane, my longtime mentor. I told him about the situation with Elise, about setting boundaries, about the complicated process of being a senior officer while also being someone's sister. His reply came at 0200 hours. Command authority isn't just for the uniform. Sometimes the hardest operations are the personal ones. Sounds like you're handling it with the same strategic clarity you bring to everything else. Proud of you, Colonel. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, thinking about all the different kinds of operations I'd run, all the different kinds of authority I'd had to exercise. Some of them involved classified sites and joint task forces. Others involved coffee shop conversations and family dinners. Both required clarity, boundaries, and the willingness to hold your ground even when it was uncomfortable. Christmas came with snow and complications. I arrived at Mom's house on December 23rd, granted a rare week of leave between operational cycles. The house was decorated in Mom's traditional style, real pine reeds, white lights, and the same ornaments we'd hung since childhood. Elise and Ryan were already there. When I walked in, Elise hugged me naturally, without the performative tightness from Thanksgiving. Progress. The next 2 days were surprisingly normal. We cooked, watched movies, played cards. Elise asked me once about my work, anything you can talk about? And when I said no, she nodded and changed the subject without making it weird. Ryan was more relaxed too, no longer treating every interaction with me like a formal briefing. We had one conversation on Christmas Eve while Elise and Mom were baking cookies. "She's different," he said. "Therapy is helping. I can tell. She showed me something the other day. A journal she's been keeping about family dynamics and patterns." He paused. "She wrote about growing up always feeling like she was in your shadow. Like you were the capable one and she was just the pretty one. I never made her feel that way." "No, but circumstances did. You had direction, she didn't. You had clear achievements, she struggled to define herself. It created this competition she couldn't win. So she changed the rules." "Exactly. She made your achievements seem smaller so hers seemed bigger by comparison." I thought about that. About how Elise had struggled through community college while I'd thrived at the academy. How I'd always known my path while she'd bounced between identities. How my clear sense of purpose might have felt like judgment to someone still searching for their own. "I wish she'd told me," I said. "I would have helped differently if I'd known she felt inadequate." "Would you though? You were so focused on your career, on the mission. Would you have had space to help her find herself?" That was uncomfortable but fair. Maybe not. I was pretty single-minded. You had to be. What you do requires that level of focus. But it meant Elise had to figure herself out alone while watching you succeed at everything you touched. And she resented me for it. And she didn't have the emotional tools to handle that resentment productively, so it came out as dismissiveness. We sat with that for a while. Through the kitchen door, I could hear Elise and Mom laughing about something. "She's trying," Ryan said. "Really trying. The therapy, the self-reflection, the changed behavior. She wants to fix this." "I know. I see it. Does it help?" Seeing her try. "Yes," I admitted. "It helps." Christmas Day was peaceful. We opened presents, ate too much, and fell into the kind of comfortable silence that comes from years of shared history. At one point, Elise handed me a gift that wasn't on the schedule. I opened it. Inside was a framed photograph from our childhood, me in my first ROTC uniform, Elise standing next to me, looking up at me with something like awe on her 14-year-old face. "I found this going through old boxes," she said. "I wanted you to have it. To remember that I was proud of you once, before everything got complicated." I looked at the photo. I'd forgotten that moment, the first time I'd worn the uniform, how Elise had insisted on taking a picture. "I was always proud of you," she said quietly. I just got confused about how to show it without feeling small myself. Thank you for this. Thank you for not giving up on me. Mom started crying happy tears. Ryan looked relieved. And I felt something in my chest unclench completely for the first time in months. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat in the living room with just the tree lights on, looking at the photograph. The young woman in that RODC uniform had no idea what was coming. 20-plus years of service, countless operations, promotions and deployments, and classified missions that would never appear in any official record. And a sister who'd spent those 20 years feeling inadequate in ways I'd never understood. We'd both made mistakes. I'd been too focused on my career to notice her struggling. She'd been too insecure to ask for help directly. We'd let misunderstandings calcify into patterns that damaged us both. But we were fixing it. Slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. My phone buzzed with a classified message. A situation developing overseas, likely requiring my attention within 48 hours. The operational world reasserting itself even during leave. I responded briefly, confirming my availability, then put the phone away. Tomorrow, I'd be back in that world. But tonight, I was just Sharon Crest, someone's sister, sitting in a house full of people who were learning to see me clearly. Both identities were real. Both mattered. And for the first time, I wasn't keeping them completely separate. I reported back to duty on December 27th. The situation overseas had evolved exactly as projected, and I spent the next 2 weeks coordinating a multi-agency response that required every hour I had. The work was consuming, complex, and precisely the kind of challenge I'd spent 20 years training for. Captain Moreno kept my schedule airtight. Briefings, secure calls, operational reviews, strategic planning sessions. I moved through them with the focused intensity that had become my default state, making decisions quickly and cleanly. On January 15th, I received orders for my next deployment. 6 months, location classified, Joint Operational Command. Standard for my position, but never easy to accept. 6 months away from anything resembling normal life. 6 months in secure facilities making decisions that would ripple through intelligence operations across multiple continents. I called Mom first. She'd learned over the years not to ask questions, just to accept the vague details I could provide. I'll be gone for a while, I said. Can't say where or when I'll be back exactly. I know, honey. Stay safe. Always do. Then I called Elise. She answered on the second ring. Hey, I said. I'm deploying soon. Wanted to let you know. A pause. How long? Several months. Can't be more specific than that. Okay. Her voice was steady. Thank you for telling me. I wanted to say, Christmas was good. Really good. Thank you for the work you've been doing. Thank you for giving me the chance to do it. Another pause. Sharon? Can I ask you something without it being weird? Sure. Are you going somewhere dangerous? The honest answer was yes. Every deployment carried risks. But that wasn't what she was really asking. I'm going where I'm needed, I said. And I'm very good at what I do. I'll come back. Promise? As much as anyone in my position can promise that, yes. Good. Because we're not done fixing this thing between us. I need more time. I smiled despite myself. Deal. We talked for a few more minutes about nothing important, just sister conversation. When we hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, the sense that I could leave for deployment without unresolved tension pulling at me from home. The next 3 weeks were preparation. Equipment checks, intelligence briefings, operational planning. I coordinated with allied agencies, briefed my replacement for domestic duties, and ensured every detail was addressed before I stepped away. The day before I left, I sat in my office reviewing final documents when General Keane appeared in the doorway. Colonel, got a minute? Yes, sir. He closed the door and sat down across from me. I read the operational plan. Solid work as always. Thank you, sir. How are you doing? Personally, I considered the question. Better than usual, actually. The situation with your sister resolved? Resolving. It's a process, but we're moving in the right direction. Good. Because what I'm about to tell you is going to make your life more complicated. He slid a folder across the desk. Your name came up for promotion to 07. The board meets in 6 months while you're deployed. I stared at the folder without touching it. Brigadier General. A star. The kind of promotion that happened to a tiny percentage of colonels and almost never to someone in my particular field. Sir, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything yet. It's not guaranteed. But your record speaks for itself, and several senior leaders have put in recommendations. I wanted you to know before you left so you could think about what it would mean. More responsibility. More oversight. Less operational freedom. Also more authority to shape policy and strategy at the highest levels. You've been in the field for 2 decades, Sharon. Maybe it's time to bring that expertise to command structure. After he left, I sat with the folder for a long time. Brigadier General. 07. A level of authority that would fundamentally change my role and responsibilities. I thought about calling Elise to tell her, then decided against it. Not because I didn't trust her, but because it wasn't real yet. No point getting ahead of ourselves. But I allowed myself to imagine it for a moment. Imagine my sister telling people, my sister's a general, without diminishment or comparison. Imagine family dinners where my rank was acknowledged and respected instead of minimized. Imagine living as one complete person instead of splitting myself between 2 worlds. The deployment was everything deployments always were: intense, isolating, and consuming. I worked with people whose names I didn't know, coordinated operations I couldn't discuss, and made decisions that affected outcomes I'd never see directly. The 6 months passed in a blur of classified briefings and operational tempo. I slept when I could, ate when I remembered, and lived entirely in the mission. Twice during that time, I had brief phone calls with Elise. She didn't ask where I was or what I was doing. She just talked about normal things: Mom's garden, her therapy sessions, a vacation she and Ryan were planning. "I'm proud of you," she said at the end of one call. "I know I can't know what you're doing, but I know it matters. And I'm proud." Those words carried more weight than any classified commendation I'd received in 20 years. In June, while I was coordinating a particularly complex operation, Captain Moreno appeared in the operations center with a message. "Ma'am, I have news from stateside. The promotion board results are in." I looked up from the tactical display I'd been studying. "And?" She smiled. "Congratulations, Brigadier General Crest." The room went quiet. The handful of officers and analysts working the operation all turned to look at me. Someone started to clap, then others joined in. I stood there, feeling the weight of 20 years of service crystallize into a single moment. All the deployments, all the classified operations, all the decisions made in secure facilities that would never see public recognition. It all led here. "Thank you, Captain," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Let's finish this operation, then I'll celebrate." But inside, I was already thinking about the call I'd make to Elise once I was back stateside. About telling her I'd earned a star. About seeing if the change in our relationship could hold under this new reality. The operation concluded successfully at 0300 hours. I filed the after-action reports, briefed the incoming shift, and finally stepped outside into the pre-dawn dark of a location I still couldn't name. 1 star. Brigadier General. A level of authority and responsibility that would reshape my entire career path. I thought about the young woman in that ROTC uniform from the photograph, the one who'd had no idea what was coming. If I could tell her anything, it would be this: the work will be harder than you imagine. The sacrifices will be real. You'll spend decades keeping secrets from people you love. You'll miss weddings and birthdays and normal life milestones. But you'll also run operations that save lives. You'll lead with integrity. You'll earn respect through competence and dedication. And eventually, you'll learn to bring your whole self to every room you enter, whether it's a classified briefing or your sister's kitchen. The path won't be easy, but it will be worth it. I went back inside to finish the shift. There was still work to do, operations to coordinate, responsibilities to fulfill. Being a general didn't change that. If anything, it meant more work, more weight, more decisions. But I'd carry it. I always had. And when I got home, I'd call my sister and tell her the news. And she'd be proud without needing to compare me to anyone else. That was the real victory. Not the star, though that mattered. The real victory was having a relationship built on truth instead of comfortable fiction. Everything else followed from there. And that's how a single moment, the tattoo, the silence, the truth, reset every boundary I'd avoided for years. If you've ever had someone underestimate you or try to define your worth for you, I want to hear it. Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic dynamic? Have you ever been forced to stand up for yourself because no one else would? Drop your story in the comments. And if you want more real, first-person stories about power, boundaries, and finally choosing yourself, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. You deserve a voice, and I hope you use it.